So when you think about the scientific revolution, what comes to mind? Probably lone geniuses, right? Galileo staring through his telescope, Newton getting hit by an apple. But what if I told you the real story was way bigger, way more political, and was actually bankrolled by Europe's most powerful king? We're about to see how Louis XIV, the famous Sun King, basically turned science into a powerful tool of the state.
Okay, to get how this all went down, you first have to understand how science was marketed back in the 17th century. And oh yeah, it was totally marketed. Just look at this thing. It's the title page from an astronomy book, but it looks more like a Broadway poster, right? You've got gods, muses, crazy celestial symbols. It's pure spectacle, all designed to wow you, and maybe more importantly, to get a rich patron to open their wallet.
And the sales pitch? Well, it was pretty straightforward, just like this little verse says. The idea was to take the really complicated, rough matter of science, all the boring equations and dense theories, and wrap it up in something beautiful and exciting. It was about making knowledge cool, making it a status symbol that everyone, from novices to experts, wanted a piece of.
So this whole idea, this performance of knowledge, wasn't just selling books. It caught the eye of the ultimate patron, King Louis XIV himself. And he looked at this grand spectacle and saw something more than just a cool marble. He saw a powerful new tool for building his kingdom.
All right, let's step into the court of the Sun King. And you got to understand, this place was a snake pit of rivalries, where power was the only thing that mattered. In this world, patronage, controlling who gets funded in the arts and sciences, was a serious political weapon. If you controlled knowledge, you controlled prestige. And if you controlled prestige, well, you had real influence at court. And right at the heart of this power struggle, you've got these two guys. On one side, there's Nicolas Fouquet, the super rich, super flashy superintendent of finances. He starts gathering his own private circle of top scientists, basically creating his own intellectual dream team, all to boost his own ambition to become the king's #1 guy. And on the other side, you have the quiet, calculating Jean-Baptiste Colbert, watching Fouquet's every move and cooking up a totally different plan for science.
And Colbert's move? It was absolutely ruthless. He goes to the young king and convinces him that Fouquet isn't just ambitious, he's a threat. He accuses him of embezzlement, of treason. Fouquet gets arrested and locked away for life. Then, in a brilliant move, Colbert swoops in. He offers jobs and funding to all of Fouquet's now patronless scholars, but with one massive catch. From now on, you don't work for a private minister, you work for the king.
Now, Colbert wasn't just collecting brainiacs to look good. No. He had some seriously practical goals. His mission was to make France the world's top maritime and commercial power. And to pull that off, he needed science. Specifically, he needed astronomy and geography to map the world, to make navigation safer, and to bring glory, or as the French called it, gloire, which is this amazing mix of fame, prestige, and raw power to his king.
And believe me, the stakes were sky high. Why? Check out this number, 600 miles. Back then, the very best maps of the Mediterranean Sea, only the busiest shipping line in Europe, were off by 600 miles in how long they thought it was. Can you imagine trying to run a navy or a global trading company with maps that are that wrong? It was an absolute disaster, and Colbert knew he had to fix it.
So, in 1666, Colbert gets the king to create the Royal Academy of Sciences, and their whole approach was brand new. They weren't just sitting around thinking, they were out there measuring. One of the members, Abbé Jean Picard, did this incredibly precise survey. He used all the latest tech, like telescopes with these tiny little rulers called micrometers, to create a chain of triangles and figure out the exact size of the Earth. This was the new playbook: methodical, state-funded, get-it-done science. But the real white whale, the biggest puzzle of all, was longitude. How do you know how far east or west you are at sea? Colbert threw money at one possible solution: this newfangled pendulum clock from Christian Huygens. The hope was it could keep perfect time on a ship. But, of course, on a rocking boat, it was a total failure. So what did Colbert do? He didn't give up. He just pivoted the funding to another idea, bringing in the famous Italian astronomer Cassini. Cassini's method was wild. He used the eclipses of Jupiter's moons as a giant clock in the sky. This is what state patronage could do. It could fund multiple bets to solve a huge problem.
Okay, so just when it feels like Colbert's grand vision for the stars is really taking off, bam, the plot twists. In 1683, Colbert dies, and his replacement as the head of the Academy is his biggest rival, the Marquis de Louvois. And Louvois, he had very, very different ideas about what science was for. His arrival was about to yank French science in a totally new direction. And the change? It was night and day. Colbert was the Navy guy, so he was all about the stars and the seas. Louvois was the Secretary of State for the Army. He cared about stuff on the ground. He immediately started shifting the Academy's money away from astronomy and pouring it into his own pet projects: military engineering, building better forts, and mapping out natural resources for his armies.
I mean, if you were an astronomer in Paris, this was bad news. Really bad news. Big mapping projects got canceled, funding for mathematicians just vanished. Those amazing rooftop observatories, which had been the pride of French science, they basically went dark. The new rock stars of science were guys like Sébastien Vauban, the genius military engineer who designed unbeatable fortresses. Science had a new boss, and that meant a new mission.
But there was one thing that all these powerful ministers had to agree on: giving the king whatever he wanted. And what Louis XIV wanted more than anything were fountains, thousands of them for his spectacular gardens at Versailles and Marly, which led to this gigantic engineering headache. How in the world do you get a river to flow 500 feet uphill? So, what was their answer? This thing, the machine of Marly. It was this colossal, unbelievably loud and complicated contraption. It had 14 giant water wheels sitting in the River Seine, powering over 200 pumps that were supposed to force water all the way up a hill. It was a true monument to the king's sheer force of will. But here's the kicker. It was a glorious failure, at least in terms of efficiency. It was so complex and clunky that an estimated 90% of all the power it generated was just lost to friction and noise. The racket it made was supposedly heard for miles. Only a measly 10% of the energy actually went into pumping water. And that tells you everything, doesn't it? Science in this era wasn't just about what worked best. It was about making a statement, about showing off the king's power and gloire.
So after all this political drama, these clashing egos, and these wildly inefficient passion projects, what are we left with? Well, it turns out they accidentally built something brand new, something that would change the world: a professional scientific state. And it was all born from the chaos of political rivalry. Think about it. The Academy started out as basically Colbert's club, filled with guys loyal to him. Then Louvois comes in and almost tanks the whole thing by completely changing its mission. But after Louvois dies, a third minister, a guy named Pontchartrain, takes over, and he looks at all this mess and basically says, okay, this is chaos. The state needs stability. So in 1699, he gives the Academy a formal rulebook, a permanent structure. He turned it into a real institution, one that wouldn't get tossed around every time a new minister came to power.
And that right there is the big takeaway. Out of all this political maneuvering, science in France completely transformed. It stopped being about a personal relationship between one scientist and one rich patron. It became a profession. It became an institution with stable funding and long-term goals, designed to solve problems for the state. And that model, it pretty much set the stage for the next 100 years of science.
The story of the Sun King scientists really shows us that the path of science has always been shaped by the people paying the bills, whether they need an empire mapped, a fortress designed, or a bunch of fountains filled with water. It was true back then, and it leaves us with a pretty sharp question for today. When you look at government grants, corporate R&D, science still serves power. So you have to ask yourself, has anything really changed?